Hi, I'm Todd Jones, host of the podcast Pressbox Access. Here's a clip from my interview with Rick Cleveland. Rick tells us about the great Archie Manning. Well, you know, one quarterback that's legendary in Mississippi who has an unimpeached reputation is Archie Manning. And you mentioned Archie. And Archie, obviously the father of Peyton and Eli, but, you know, young folks might not realize Archie was such a great quarterback himself. You know, he went on to play for the New Orleans Saints for 10 years, 71 to 81, and really got his ass beaten on a bunch of bad teams, and yet was a heck of a player. I mean, he was NFC Player of the Year in 1978 on a losing team.
79, and he's NFC Player of the Year.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Roger Staubach, and, you know, Archie and Roger Staubach played a lot alike. You know, they threw on the run a lot, and both were great athletes, not just great quarterbacks, but great athletes. And I asked Roger, I said, what was the difference between you and, you know, a Pro Football Hall of Famer that won Super Bowls and everything, and Archie? And he said, just luck. He said, I played for Dallas, one coach my whole career. Archie played for the New Orleans Saints. I don't even know how many coaches he had. I mean, there were times, Archie tells a great story about being in the huddle, and at that time that they used tight ends to send in the plays with, and tight end comes in the huddle and gives Archie the play and says, Archie said, "Wait a second, who are you?" The Saints had signed him. The Saints had signed him the day before. He didn't even know him.
Oh.
But I tell you, you know, of all the people I've ever covered, Archie Manning is the best human being. And the way his sons are, it's a direct reflection of the way Archie and Olivia Manning raised him.
Mm. Well, Archie, his legend began back in college, you know, 68, 69, 70 at Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
I mean, they wrote songs about the man, the Ballad of Archie Who.
Yeah, the Ballad of Archie Who. It was number one. I mean, if you couldn't turn on a radio station in 1969 in Mississippi and not hear the Ballad of Archie Who. Yeah.
Do you know any of the lyrics still?
I remember the way it finished was the best rootin' tootin' quarterback who ever played the game. Yeah,
that's a pretty good finish to a song.
Yeah, well, he was an amazing player to watch. I mean, you know, he finished third in the Heisman Trophy voting his senior season, and he missed 3 games with a broken arm.
Right. He played the Sugar Bowl with a broken arm, right?
He played, actually, it was the Gator Bowl.
The Gator Bowl,
they
I'm
played
sorry. Yeah.
Auburn, and
yeah.
He hadn't played. Well, he actually played against LSU. They tried to play him against LSU, and he had a cast on his arm. He played with a cast, and then he played in the Gator Bowl, and I think Auburn won the game 35-28. But he was fabulous. He was the MVP in the Sugar Bowl as a sophomore at Ole Miss. He was a great player on an otherwise fairly mediocre team.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned him as, you know, being one of your all-time favorites. You know, obviously a great player, but what made him so special to you as a writer, reporter over the years? The working relationship that you had with Archie.
I'll give you one story that encapsulates why I feel the way I do about Archie. Is that this is at the end of his career. He's already, you know, he spent all those years getting beat up with the Saints, and then they trade him to Houston. He gets beat up there, and they trade him to Minnesota, and they're terrible. This would be like 83, 84. They weren't very good. Les Steckel was the head coach, and Wade Wilson was actually the starting quarterback. But I remember they're playing a Thursday night game, and I remember getting home from work and turning it on, just hoping that Archie might get a chance. They might get so far behind that he gets a chance to play, and that's exactly what happened. They're behind 31-0 at halftime, and they put Archie
31-0.
They put Archie in the game, I think, because they were afraid Wade Wilson was going to get killed.
Let's put the stunt double in.
Yeah. So they put Archie in, and he just turns back the clock. I mean, he's scrambling all over the field, throwing darts. They end up losing, but he made it a one-score game in the fourth quarter. And I had already written a column for the next day's paper. But I called him in and said, I'm rewriting. We'll save the other one. I'm gonna rewrite about Archie. And I wrote a column about basically about him turning back the clock after all these years. And so the next afternoon, I'm in my office at the Clarion Ledger, and about 2:00 in the afternoon, the phone rings. And I recognized the voice immediately. It was Archie. And he was calling from Minneapolis. And I said, Archie, what's going on, man? He said, I just calling to thank you. And I said, for what? He said, for the column you wrote in today's Jackson Daily News. And I said, well, we got a pretty good circulation in Mississippi, but we don't circulate much in Minneapolis. How did you, and this was before the internet.
Right.
He said, well, I said, well, how do you know about it? He said, because my mama called me and read me every word of it.
Wow.
And, let's face it, Todd, you've done what I do. I mean, you don't get many calls like that from professional athletes. That's Archie in a nutshell. There's so many stories that never get out about things that he's done behind the scenes for people, kids that are dying, stuff like that. He's not doing it. He doesn't want it ever to be publicized. He's just doing it because he's basically doing it because that's the way he'd want to be treated if it was him,